Hey Flatline Nation, this is Andrew with Flatline Knives, bringing you part one of a Canister Damascus project. I started with 52-100 ball bearings, mild steel can, liquid paper, and powdered steel. I pre-cut the end caps to make sure they fit really nice and tight, and I'm welding the bottom on here to start, making sure that I'm not leaving any air holes. Now, I'm not the world's best welder by any means, but it seems to be on there pretty well. Now it's time to line the inside with liquid paper. Don't even bother with that brush thing, it's a total waste of time. I make sure and coat all the surfaces on the interior of the can with the liquid paper. Anywhere that the liquid paper isn't touching is a spot where it could potentially try to weld to your billet and give you a bad time. And once it's fully coated, it does take a little bit of time to dry. I let mine sit for 15-20 minutes, and I was kind of coming back and testing it every once in a while to make sure that it was fully dried. It's really important that you let this air dry, because if you expose it to any type of heat source, it changes the chemical composition of the liquid paper and it doesn't work nearly as well as it's supposed to. Don't forget to coat the top cap as well. Once it's dry, it's time to add the ball bearings. I had to guess how long to make the can based on the volume of ball bearings I had, and I guessed a little long. So I had to fill up the void space there with 1084 powder. After a few scoops of the 1084 powder, you got to make sure to tamp all that powder down because there's still a lot of air voids in and around those ball bearings. So tapping it with the hammer lets all that powder settle, and obviously it settled quite a bit, so I had plenty of room to add more. It's interesting, after this was all fused together, you'll be able to see where this portion of the billet is, where there's no ball bearings and it's only the 1084 powder. It's pretty cool. Once that's all tamped down, it's time to get the lid welded on. I tack welded one corner and then I hammered down the other corners as the heat kind of warped the lid of the can a little bit and made sure to keep nice tight compression on that can. This was my first attempt at Canister Damascus, so I didn't try any of the tricks of drilling a vent hole. I didn't put a scrap of paper in there. I just wanted to try it and see how it worked without any of those tricks. Then I added on a handle and it was time to go into the fire. With Canister Damascus, it's imperative that you let the material soak for longer than you think it needs. One of the adages that I've learned is if you think it's ready, give it 5 or 10 more minutes because it's not ready yet. It's also really important to rotate the metal every few minutes to make sure it's getting even heat from all sides. Once it's up to welding temp, and I'm sure it's up to that temp throughout, it's time for the initial squish. Here was my first of a few critical errors. I definitely squished way too hard on one side without rotating. Doing this created these flanges that show up on either side, and I was really concerned about creating cold shuts by squishing the other direction, so once I did this, I was pretty well stuck in this orientation. I'm still new to using this press, and I really love it, but it was having a bit of a headache, and I couldn't figure out why at first, but it turns out the extension cord I was using had this little trip in it, and it was tripping out anytime I pressed too hard, so I got that sorted out really quick. Once I was sure I had good compression on the can, it was time to cut off those flanges and cut off the end and see how it looks. Yeah, I don't know about that upper corner. We'll have to cut the can off and see how it looks. This is where that liquid paper really did an excellent job. You can see how easily that chisel is sliding between the can material and the billet inside. There's virtually no welding between the outer can and the inner billet, which made this process way faster than I thought it was going to be. As I'm peeling the can back, I'm starting to have a little bit more faith of how this billet is turning out. You can still see some of the ball bearings exposed through the powder, but everything seems to be one tight billet. Once I got those two sides peeled, and I would flip it over and repeat the process on the other side, and once again, the can just came right off. The billet pretty much just falls right out. Here you can see the billet's actually in pretty good shape, and inside those flanges were solid welded 1084 powder, which was kind of cool. Took the billet to the grinder and took care of some of the cold shuts that were exposed. I'm going to throw it back in the fire and flux it and see if we can get it consolidated more. Thank you for following along with part 1 of this Canister Damascus build. It was a ton of fun. Be sure and like and subscribe to catch part 2 of this Canister Damascus build.